Hey y'all, it's your girl Aaron, and today I wanted to talk about how I think a person's ideology can influence the way they interact with others on like social media or even in person. So when you are engaging with people socially, talking person to person and stuff, you can have a social capital like hierarchical system, and then you can have like a non-hierarchical social system. And so if we were talking about the way you treat a person individually, do you act in a way that demonstrates that you see yourself as being in a non-hierarchical relation to people, or is it above or beyond that person? So bootlicking or sucking up in a non-hierarchical relation, if you talk to someone, do you have mutual respect for them? If you have criticisms against the things they're saying, do you bring up those criticisms as someone who has an equivalent opinion, or do you bring it up as if your opinion is superior to theirs? If you have criticism for someone, are you trying to put them in their place? Are you trying to take them down a notch? Are you trying to show them how you need to be taken more seriously? Those are all positioning. Those are all trying to present yourself or come across in the interaction as having more social capital, because then obviously there's more chance that you'll get agreed with, there's more chance that people will take you seriously and pay attention to what you're saying and stuff. So let's say you are chatting with people on the internet, social media, whatever, or even in real life, and as you're discussing something, somebody keeps like straw manning you or keeps trying to attack you on a personal level instead of the things you're saying, or is trying to like be dismissive or use logical fallacies to try and sweep what you're saying under the rug, because they don't actually want to take it seriously, or they could act hostile towards you. They could accuse you of something that is like completely out there, or like there's a whole lot of things that people can do in these social interactions that are trying to undermine the person's social capital, trying to undermine their right to be taken seriously, rather than that being the standard for everyone. If everyone is unique and everyone can bring an individual take to the discussion, then you value each person. So you don't just say, well, I've heard that line before, because if it's an individual person saying the line, then you respect the agency of their thought, you respect their ability to make up their own mind about things, and you say, well, then I'll take that thing that they're saying seriously, even though I've heard it before. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but when I say take seriously, I mean you criticize it on the points itself, and you don't just be like, oh, whatever, like, you don't know what you're talking about, or who are you to say this, or all those kinds of sort of, I would say, bad faith engagements. So I think when it comes to politics and trying to build a movement for liberation of people, I think it's really important, in my opinion, that we try to unite and work with and build with people who are going to be respecting the individual and trying to have a non-hierarchical social arrangement, and not be trying to Game of Thrones and all this nonsense. Like you get people like authoritarian socialists, or tankies as I like to call them, who are out there defending like the police in Hong Kong, because they are trying to do this sort of Game of Thrones style politics where they want the House China to take over Hong Kong, because they believe House China can better challenge the Iron Throne that the USA has, or whatever. Like they have this very like theatrical sort of simplistic view of how politics in the world works. And actually, if you just spend your time looking at money, you can get a way better understanding than what they have. Just look at where the money's flowing and you'll know where the hierarchy of nations is at and stuff. And the thing is, their talk about anti-imperialism is meant to be against the way that some nations, like let's say the USA and I would argue China, and others like Russia, and Saudi Arabia, and what these nations do is they use foreign policy or war or some kind of hostile or violent tactic to keep other people or other nations subservient to them economically. And so they benefit from like cheap labor in those places, or they benefit from the resources there without having to pay tariffs or whatever it might be. But essentially it's like colonization through capitalism. Although you also do get imperialism through actual colonization. China isn't trying to colonize Hong Kong, it's more an annexation, but it's the similar type of process. And so if you're against imperialism, if you're against some nations benefiting over others being less well off than them, and they maintain them at that lower level of progress because they want to keep benefiting off of cheap labor and stuff, and if you're against that kind of thing, then your best bet isn't to support the second strongest imperialist against the first strongest. Your answer is to oppose both, to say that it doesn't matter where it is. We are not tolerant of it ever because we're against it limiting of the agency of people, because if number two wins against number one, you still don't have agency. What we want is agency. The problem with imperialism is it's limiting agency, so you argue for agency, not for the inherent ability of one power that's abusing agency to stand up to another one that's abusing agency. No, you say, I don't want anyone to be abusing agency ever, and then it gets really easy to say, look, I support the workers in Hong Kong. What their demands are would be good for them, because they are wanting more autonomy and agency over decision making over their own lives and region. That's always good, and even if it were only the top 1% of their society who were demanding it, it would still be good for them to have more agency. It's always good to have more control over your own destiny. And then you'll notice that it's people who often have that sort of Game of Thrones style thinking about, society and the way global powers you need to support some of them, ironically, instead of just being against hierarchy and all that kind of stuff altogether. And in your discussions with people, you also want to make sure that you're respecting people's agency. And so bad faith arguing tactics, when you mock someone, go after them personally, try to dismiss what they say by straw manning or trying to virtue signal or call them out for stuff that they are clearly not trying to say or whatever. Calling a whole bunch of friends to come and join you in berating the person without actually respecting their individual opinion and leveling your criticism against the substance of what they're saying, not against the person themselves or against a straw man dismissive treatment of the things they're saying. So if we are to talk about things like left unity, and we're going to talk about, for example, trying to work with people who are pro-state capitalism or pro-authoritarian socialism, then we're also saying we're going to work with people who have thought that it's okay for there to be a hierarchy and for there to be, this authoritarian nature to their society in the future. Then what's going to stop them from being like that now? And so in your trying to team build, they are going to constantly be using these bad faith tactics. And I think that's often why you have a whole lot of hostility and conflict and division. It's because you're trying to unite people who have mutual respect for each other with people who don't have mutual respect with each other. And that's always going to cause fighting, because the ones who are going to be excusing authoritarianism are going to constantly be using these bad faith positioning tactics to try and bring themselves up in social capital because they think hierarchy is okay. Like, why wouldn't they want to be at the top of the hierarchy if they think it's okay? I mean, maybe some of them wouldn't, but you can't hold it against someone. If you're going to say a hierarchy is okay, you can't hold it against them for trying to get to the top of it. And that's why I think we shouldn't be saying hierarchies are okay, because they in themselves have an incentive for people to throw each other under the bus to try and get to the top. It doesn't make sense to me why you'd say hierarchies are okay, actually. But anyway, so you're trying to like unite people who think like hierarchies are okay with people who think they're not. You're trying to unite people who want to have substantive discussions about the points they're saying, regardless of whether they are already right or not. If they're wrong, they want to have that be pointed out to them so that they can learn. And those kinds of good faith engagements and those types of people, you want to combine that group of people with the ones who are like all about trying to achieve some level of perfection, because it's like, you got to be at the top of their social hierarchy to be taken seriously and stuff in their movement. It's not based on what you say, because if you say the exact same thing in a hierarchical organization or movement or whatever group of people, if you say the exact same thing as someone at the bottom of the hierarchy or at the top, you get a completely different reaction to it. Someone at the top of the hierarchy, they'll be like, oh my word, that is so amazing, wow. But if you are someone who said it at the bottom of that hierarchy, then they wouldn't even like listen to what you're saying. And in capitalism, that's like where the boss is like, oh, thank you for this thing you made. Oh, look, I made it. That's how people at the top of the hierarchy, they can just command people's attention, because in the system they've justified some on top and others on the bottom. This person is at the top, and because it's shaped like whatever, like there's less of them, and it's pointing you to look at them constantly. And if you say in a non-hierarchical group of people, if you say the same thing as someone, let's say, who would normally have, the least social capital, like maybe you are suffering a lot of intersections of oppression, like you're trans, you are black, you are autistic, etc. Not all social hierarchies have the same, like some try to change it up a bit, but anyway, like some are based on religion, some are based on all kinds of things. If you said, the same thing on two opposite spectrums of whatever you would imagine, the people are going to be taken seriously, because it's what they're saying that is really what is mattering more. So that's why I think, we really have to take a good look at trying to unite with people who are okay with authoritarianism. We really need to look at trying to unite with people who are okay with hierarchy, because if you're someone who wants that kind of society hierarchy, then I can understand you wanting it in your movements, in your groups of people, your communities, because why wouldn't you? And you got to practice on your hierarchy skills, because there's going to be one in the future, and you got to also know, like, when you take over the states, when your glorious revolution, who's going to be the eternal leader, and who's going to be the slightly above prole manager, and who's going to be a regular prole. Like, I think everyone in a tanky Facebook group is imagining in their minds that because they're engaging in all this tanky social media engagement and philosophizing and learning of Marx and all these Lenin and all that nonsense, in my opinion, that's now going to position them as a party member and not a prole. So they are going to be in the upper class in their society that is going to create that class division, or attempt to create it based on wokeness, basically, instead of on capital. I'm sure capital will find its way to reintroduce itself into that process, as it always seems to do. especially when you don't even admit that it's possible for it to do so. And if we're going to have a left unity with those people, then yes, we need to actually embrace sectarianism, embrace, constant hostility and fighting, because that's what we're asking for. Because we're saying, take these people who want to have good faith, mutual respect discussions and stuff, unite them with people who are trying to get to the top of a social hierarchy and are okay with using bad faith tactics to get there, combine those together, and you are expecting what? Because there's going to be people who might not want the social hierarchy to be established, constantly fighting with the people trying to make sure it is established because they're trying to get to the top of it, and it's literally a recipe for constant fighting. Like, trying to do that is asking to fight. You are trying to pick a fight. You are putting, two opposing, two enemies or whatever in the same room or whatever. It's like they have completely different outlooks on life, and now you're going to be surprised when there's infighting. You're going to be surprised when everyone is getting hurt, and there's going to be people who are doing their best to try and protect others from these bad faith tactics, who are then going to be the targets of bad faith tactics, who are then going to be potentially misidentified as a troublemaker, kicked out of the community, which then alienates the people who are doing the right thing, and it's a mess. It's do you think that you can achieve some kind of global scale movement that is going to also still have any kind of egalitarianism when that's how your foundation and how the beginning of your movement is? We got to say no to authoritarianism, because it is the principle and the value, and excusing it or having any kind of justification for it is the root of bad faith social acting. It's a root of thinking that you can have social hierarchy, and that produces social capital, produces incentive to get to the top, produces incentive to throw others at the bottom. And then if you do have people who don't want that to happen, then it produces a fight. If you're someone who wants a hierarchical society, then unite to heck with people who do that. But if you're someone who wants a non-hierarchical society, an egalitarian society, you can only unite with those people. There is no such thing as unity between non-hierarchicalness and hierarchicalness. I don't know how tell me, please, if you think let's do it that way. Tell me how you can have that kind of unity, and then we can discuss that, and I'll try and tell you why I don't agree with that specific thing, because I'm fairly confident up front that there won't be anything someone can bring up of why it's a good idea to combine those things. And yet that's what people keep doing every time they say left unity between authoritarian socialists and people who want non-hierarchy. It's I feel like it's really simple, but the reason why often it's not taken seriously is because the second you entertain and platform the tankies or the authoritarian socialists or people who think hierarchy is okay, the second you platform them and treat what their position as valid, you are admitting defeat, because you're saying, well, I'm going to admit that it's okay for there to be a hierarchy. If you've already decided to have unity with authoritarians, you've already decided to lose because their bad faith tactics are always going to undermine and overtake your good faith efforts. And when they say left unity, what they're saying is stop trying to bring about egalitarianism. Stop trying to have non-hierarchicalness. Stop trying to fight against social hierarchies and social capital. Or stop trying to go against the party line. And just unites in conformity to having a hierarchy. That's what left unity means when an authoritarian says it. And so when a non-authoritarian, when a non-hierarchical person says left unity, what they should be meaning is unite with people who are going to be non-hierarchical and have mutual respect for each other's uniqueness. Because if that's not what they're saying, then they're saying hierarchy is okay. And so what is even the point of having an ideology that is for egalitarianism if in practice you're never going to ever try and make sure social relations stay that way? You got to protect it. You got to create a safe space essentially for people to engage with each other and build this movement where you don't accept the positioning, you don't accept the bad faith argument tactics and the defense and justifications of hierarchy and authoritarianism. And I don't know if what I've said is really that profound, and I feel like I've kind of waffled a bit, and it is another kind of long video, but this is just something that is coming out of my own feeling, how I've seen, for example, the comments section on someone like Non-Compete's video become a mess because a lot of authoritarians are coming in and trying to defend the cops, trying to defend China's, they say, has a right to limit Hong Kong's agency and autonomy. Like, I'm not surprised that it becomes a mess because I think that's the natural outcome of mixing authoritarians and non-authoritarians. When you only have authoritarians, then it'll look like echo chamber, and when you only have non-authoritarians, it'll look like debate, basically, or just discussion and conversation. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.